What would your life look like if you had total freedom to do what you love every day? You would wake up and not have to go to work, but maybe enjoy a book or work on some art. Or maybe dedicate your life to philosophy. Our forgotten philosopher today, Nicolas Gomez Davila, had such a life. And what he did with all this freedom might surprise you. Davila was born near Bogota, Colombia in 1913, and he hit the jackpot when it came to which family he was born into. They were mega wealthy. They would travel, specifically to Paris and England. They had private tutors. They were members of exclusive clubs. It reminds me of characters from an F. Scott Fitzgerald novel. All this wealth was due to Davila's father managing a carpet factory, and throughout almost his entire life, Davila's father was the one actually managing it. So Davila could just sit back and relax and let the family business support his lifestyle. After his father passed, Davila did take over management, but this guy, he would literally just go into the office once a week, tell him to make more money, and then leave after 10 minutes. That was his job. And even then, this period of Davila managing the factory was short-lived, because his son would eventually take over. So ultimately, Davila had a life of easy, privileged leisure. He would go to lunch at the Bogota Jockey Club, playing polo and socializing with the Columbian elite. Some Colombian politicians from all over the political spectrum would try to get him to work for them, but he turned them down, preferring his life of leisure. Now, I may have painted Nicholas here as lazy and hedonistic, but in actuality, he was working, just not in a typical way. Davila was a voracious, scholarly reader. At the end of his life, his library would consist of something near 30,000 books, and many of these books were philosophy books. And he was not just consuming knowledge, but attempting to create a philosophy of his own. But here's the kicker. You'd think a guy so well read with all the time in the world would want to publish some groundbreaking work for the world to see. But no. He wrote books alright, but they were private, only for close friends and family. Eventually his family did convince him to publish his stuff, and while he did, it wasn't really widespread. Davila seemed to take every precaution to make his books as inaccessible and unheard of as possible, and that's why he makes it into this Forgotten Philosophers series. Now, his work was easy for me to find today, with his daughter compiling some wait. That's his daughter? Anyway, his daughter compiled together a collection of his works into a single volume entitled Escolios a un textos implicito, Selection, or Scholia to an Implicit Text Selection. Davila chose to do a lot of his work in aphorisms, or little blurbs, less than a paragraph. Aphorisms are kind of like quotes you find when you just search inspirational quotes or some shit on Google. So in this video, we're going to take a look at some of his aphorisms. Some agreeable, others questionable. Now before we begin, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room with Davila. We gotta address a potential controversy. Davila described himself as an authentic reactionary. Now, I'm not really a political guy, but I've heard the term reactionary used in a negative connotation, kind of relating to fascism it seems. Well, upon reading a small selection of Davila's aphorisms, being a reactionary to him takes almost more of a literal meaning, reacting against things. And throughout his aphorisms, he's rarely advocating for things, but instead applying skepticism to popularly held belief systems. This might be why he's earned the nickname of the Nietzsche from the Andes. He's attacking these popularly held ideas. So at least from what I read, he's not advocating for any system, let alone a fascist system if that's what you're afraid of. Although he does critique things like democracy, progress, utopias, technology, communism, all sorts of political ideas. Modern man already knows that political solutions are ludicrous, and suspects that economic solutions are too. Now he does have that base, that thing that he believes in which he doesn't critique, and that would be the Catholic faith. Not necessarily the institution of the church. He seems more favorable to a personal faith like Kierkegaard, but faith nonetheless. But overall, he seems just politically skeptical. That might be the best way to put it. I just wanted to address that potential concern that might have arisen. With that being said, here are some aphorisms of his that stuck out to me. Sex does not solve even sexual problems. This one gave me a good laugh. I see what he's saying though. You have sexual desires, you have sex, you get that post-sex calm, that satisfaction, then later on you're back to having that desire. So the desire has been satisfied, but only temporarily. But what if we played around with the words in this aphorism to say food does not even solve hunger problems? After all, you eat to satisfy your hunger, but then you eventually get hungry again. Does this mean we should throw out food because it doesn't permanently satisfy us? What if instead of just saying sex or food, we throw in the word consistent? Consistent food solves hunger, but does consistent sex solve sexual problems? Theoretically, maybe. Every time you get aroused, you have sex. Would that be classified as solving the sexual problem? Possibly. Human sexuality is such a complex thing though, and the term sexual problem being used here could mean anything. I imagine Davila would say, look, hunger cannot be solved outside of food. It is a required prescription, whereas sexual problems can be addressed without sex. But going monk mode is quite a challenge in itself, and it might be easier just to have consistent sex than to kill the desire altogether. See how much we could get from just a single line? This is why I like aphorisms. Speaking of which, number 2. We should not conclude that everything is permitted, if God does not exist, but that nothing matters. Permission ends up being laughable when what is permitted loses its meaning. So this is a play on that famous quote that is often misattributed to Dostoevsky, the "if God doesn't exist, then everything is permitted" line. Davila is saying, look, if God doesn't exist, then nothing matters. So who gives a shit about permission? Permission doesn't matter, the thing you want permission to do doesn't matter, you don't matter, I don't matter, who cares? Even though I don't necessarily agree that you need God to have things matter to you, I think this is a clever expansion on that quote. Art never grows tiresome because each work is an adventure, which no previous success guarantees. I think this applies not just to art but to sports as well. Creating or performing something does take into account past experience, but there are so many other factors at play that the journey is all brand new. If you're good at painting, that alone doesn't guarantee that your next painting will work out. Your hand could slip, you might overlook something, your vision might just not be achieved for whatever reason. Although this makes art scary, it also makes it exciting. It does mean you mess up, so you gotta be on your toes, but it also means you might be able to do better. Sociological categories authorize us to move about in society without paying attention to each man's irreplaceable individuality. Sociology is the ideology of our indifference towards our neighbors. This next aphorism also kinda goes along with the last one. In order to exploit man in peace, it is most convenient first to reduce him to sociological abstractions. You might hear people say, because you are a member of X group, you must have Y characteristic. And sometimes these people could have statistics that back up their point. Let's say there's a study. They tested 500 people with glasses and 500 people without to do some sort of test. And the glasses wearers did 15% worse on the test. The sociological jump is to then treat all glasses wearers you come across as representative of that study. It's a disregard of the individual who just happens to wear glasses. So just remember the limits of social empiricism, and don't make assumptions about an individual, regardless of whatever sociological studies are out there. It's just lazy thinking. It's also dangerous thinking. As the last aphorism states, it dehumanizes individuals. And throughout history, we see example after example of groups of people being labeled as this or that, regardless of the individuals who make up that group. The only exception to this that I can think of are analytic statements, where it's a requirement to fulfill something to be a part of the group. For example, to be a glasses wearer, you must wear glasses. That's a safe assumption. It's not a safe assumption to say, well, this study showed glasses wearers are dumb, therefore this glasses wearer is dumb. No, you're dumb. Alright, one more aphorism. Virtue that does not doubt itself culminates in attacks against the world. Now, this is not just a repeat of that phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because it offers a solution, doubt. Look, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but the road to heaven is also paved with good intentions. So good intentions are not inherently bad. We just want to know which ones will result in morally good acts. Now, when these good intentions are sitting around in your head, they're neutral. It hasn't had an effect on the world yet. And while that intent is chilling in your head, take time to doubt. Really attack your own beliefs, as if you're in a debate against them. Heck, be open and challenge your friends to poke holes in your beliefs. And perhaps, if they survive your onslaught of questioning, it'll give you further indication that it is the right way to go. So as you could probably guess, because Davila wrote in this aphoristic format, it allowed him to jump all over the place topic-wise. So there's a little something for everyone. Now I want to challenge you guys out there watching this to create an aphorism of your own, because I know you could do it. You know you could do it. So comment below an aphorism. And also comment below your thoughts on Davila and any of the aphorisms mentioned in this video. Subscribe, like, and hit the bell button for more videos, and I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.